African and Nigerian economy. Here are the following updates we have at the moment. At the global level, confirmed cases are 4,494,721, while 301,775 deaths have been recorded across the globe. 1,691,502 recoveries have been recorded at the moment. In Africa, confirmed cases are 73,226, while 2,498 deaths have been recorded, while 25,450 recoveries have also been recorded. In Nigeria, the confirmed cases are 4,971, with 164 deaths and 1,070 recoveries. We bring you some developing stories that we have at the moment. In the United States of America, nearly 3 million laid-off workers have applied for unemployment benefits last week as the viral outbreak led more companies to slash jobs, even though most states have begun to let some businesses reopen under certain restrictions. Roughly 36 million people have now filed for jobless aid in the 2 months since coronavirus first forced millions of businesses to close their doors and shrink their workforces, the Labor Department in the U.S. said. Global oil refining production could start to rebound in June, the International Energy Agency said today. But refiners' margin may be squeezed due to rising crude prices as producers slashed output much faster than expected. Refiners throttled back output globally as the coronavirus pandemic sent billions of people locked down and cut fuel demand by 30%. Crude prices crashed, prompting the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies, known as OPEC Plus, to agree to cut oil output by 9.7 million barrels per day, while other nations have also reduced their output. Now to news in Nigeria. The leadership of the National Assembly today met with the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning to be briefed by the latter on the plan by the federal government to amend the 10.59 trillion naira 2020 budget passed by the National Assembly in December last year. The meeting, which had in attendance principal officers from both chambers, was presided over by the Senate President, Senator Ahmed Lawan, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila. The Senate President, in his welcome address, told the executive arm of government to ensure that the interest of Nigerians remains protected in the proposed cuts to the budget. Lawan also expressed the willingness of the federal lawmakers to expeditiously consider the proposed amendments to the 2020 budget, which the minister said will be presented to the National Assembly by next week. The budget amendment is very important, but I believe that when we are faced with this kind of challenge brought by the COVID-19 pandemic, it is an emergency and we should do everything and anything possible to fast-track the passage and implementation of the government intervention that is so critical and crucial at this stage. I believe that we shouldn't delay it any longer. Next week, and I would suggest the early part of next week, we should have the document of the medium-term expenditure framework ready so that we can consider it alongside the budget. It is supposed to be the tonic of what Nigerians are waiting for. Speaking further, he said, "We have listened to various adjustments you have made to avoid going into recession. However, to avoid going into a deeper recession, I think we need to do a little bit much more." On the meeting, he said with the leadership, he suggested that engaging the relevant committees in the Senate and House of Reps was critical, looking at the nitty-gritty that will be considered more in the detail at the presentation level. On the whole, the Senate leader assured the National Assembly and Executive Arm are on the same page, and that is to say that it will work to ensure that the Budget 2020 amendment will address the needs of the people of the country. Giving further insight, he said, "One thing is that the net public expenditure must be targeted at net maximum performance for the benefit of the people of this country. In other words, we must come up with an amendment budget that is operable and favorable to Nigerians," Senator Lawan said. Also giving his remarks, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Femi Gbajabiamila, called on the federal government to adopt a feasible benchmark in the proposed amendment to 2020 budget. According to him, the benchmark is so critical and so important because once you pass the law, it becomes difficult to adjust that benchmark. And then what happens to the excess? We have always had problems with the excess crude account, potentially an account which has no backing of the law. So let's even assume that the price remains static at $35. That means we have $10 going to the excess crude account, which we have no control over in terms of spending. That is why we guard that benchmark price very jealously. Giving further insight, he said, is there a possibility of having a proviso built in the budget so that there can be an automatic kick if the benchmark price goes beyond $26 or $27 per barrel? We want you to explore that possibility, he said to the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning. Giving his final thoughts, Right Honorable Femi Gbagjagbamila said, so I think you should study the market and see what happens next week by the time you present the adjusted budget. Speaking on Nigeria's debt profile, the Speaker said, I would also want to address the issue of our deficit and tie it with the issue of debt relief. I'm not sure I've heard any presentation on how much we owe and how much we are paying back in this budget. Speaking further on the debt relief and the profile of Nigeria, he said the reason he asked this question was that he believes, for a better word, some of the creditors are very vulnerable at this point. Depending on how is packaged and the case is made, he believes there should be ones coming to beg and take debt relief, if not outright cancellation. Also speaking, the Minister of Finance, Mrs. Zain Ahmed, while briefing the leadership of the National Assembly, said the $57 per barrel crude oil price initial benchmark approved in the 2020 budget is no longer sustainable. According to her, it is necessary to reallocate resources in the 2020 budget to ensure the effective implementation of required emergency measures and mitigate the negative socioeconomic effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. Mrs. Ahmed stated that in line with the global economic outlook and relevant domestic considerations, the assumptions underpinning the 2020 to 2022 medium-term expenditure framework and the 2020 budget was revised to slash crude oil benchmark price from $57 per barrel to $25 per barrel. That has been revised, reducing crude oil production benchmark from 2.18 million barrels per day to 1.9 million barrels per day. She added that the federal government also adjusted the budget exchange rate to 260 naira to $1 and reduced the upfront fiscal deductions by the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation for mandated oil and gas sector expenditures by 65% from 1.223 trillion naira to 424 billion naira. She disclosed that the amount available for funding the 2020 budget is now estimated at 5.548 trillion naira, down from 8.419 trillion naira, a revised revenue estimate which is 34%, that's 2.87 trillion naira lower than what was initially approved. Federal government's aggregate expenditure budget was slashed by 88.412 billion naira, statutory transfer from 560.47 billion naira to 297.87 billion naira, and overhead costs for ministries, departments, and agencies of government from 202.43 billion naira to 240.91 billion naira. Debt service provisions was, however, increased from 2.453 trillion naira to 2.678 trillion naira. On provisions of 500 billion naira for COVID-19 intervention fund, the finance minister in her presentation explained that 263.63 billion naira will be sourced from the federal government special accounts, 186.37 billion naira from federation special accounts, and the balance of 50 billion naira expected as grants and donations. According to her, the sum of 186.37 billion naira will be applied towards COVID-19 interventions across the federation, while an additional 213.60 billion naira was provided in the service-wide votes for COVID-19 crisis interventions recurrent expenditures. She disclosed that while a total of 100.03 billion naira was provisioned in the intervention fund for new capital spending, the federal government carried out a cut in capital expenditures for ministries, departments, and agencies of government from 1.564 trillion naira to 1.262 trillion naira. Although the coronavirus pandemic has affected lives and livelihoods of Nigerians in different ways, it, however, offers an opportunity for Nigerian people and government to have a reset in critical sectors of the economy and social services, according to the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osibanjo. Professor Osibanjo stated this today at a virtual launch of the Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund, NSSF, an initiative of the Nigerian Sovereign Investment Authority, the global citizens, and partners. The Vice President, who joined the event from his office virtually, described the NSSF as a design to provide additional support for Nigeria's response to COVID-19 pandemic. According to him, the fund will enable Nigerian citizens resident at home or in the diaspora, as well as international donors, to come together and directly contribute to Nigeria's fight against the pandemic. Speaking on the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic on the Nigerian economy, The Vice President said the establishment of the Nigerian Solidarity Support Fund will support the creation of a stronger, more resilient, more inclusive political economy and healthcare system. According to him, this is a creative, forward-looking and thoughtful response to what is perhaps the most profound global and domestic challenge to health and economy in human history. We need not belabor the point that the COVID-19 challenge is also an unprecedented opportunity for us as a nation and people to reset in critical sectors of the economy and social services. Emphasizing the point about resetting Nigerian systems, Professor Sibanjo said the deep plunge in oil earnings, the disruptions to business and commerce on account of lockdowns have meant that we must develop a comprehensive economic response. Speaking about the efforts being made by the federal government to ensure that Nigeria is properly positioned to deal with the fallout of the pandemic, Professor Sibanjo said there are several initiatives in place now to attempt an effective response to COVID-19 disaster. Continuing, the Vice President noted that in addition, there is the drive to re-engineer and rethink our healthcare delivery systems. This by itself is a massive undertaking that will involve the states, local governments, and the private healthcare community. He was excited to hear that the Global Citizens already has in mind a project to build healthcare centers across every local government in Nigeria. According to him, in the past few years, I'm sure those of you familiar with the activities of government probably note there's been quite a bit of effort around creating a social intervention program. The precise purpose of that is not just to provide safety nets for several of the vulnerable and poor in our midst, but more importantly to provide jobs, provide credit to several informal traders, smallholder farmers, several others in our economic value chain who are usually ignored or untouched by several other credit facilities and other economic initiatives of government. This fund will support that, and I have noticed that this is one of the objectives to support the social investment efforts of the government, especially the protection of vulnerable and provision of assistance to many in that huge informal sector that we have. He commended the NSIA, Global Fund, and other partners involved in the creation of the Nigeria Solidarity Support Fund. And that will be all for tonight's COVID-19 updates. You can visit our website, www.proshareng.com, to get more updates from our news stories and videos. This period of the COVID-19 pandemic, ProShare has prepared for you a solid platform, robust, reliable, and credible, giving you updates on the global, national, and state level trackers of COVID-19 pandemic and how it's impacting our economy. Log on to www.proshareng.com/COVID-19 and you get all the details you need. Also, you can see our social media platforms showing on the screen for further updates on our market reports. Till we come your way again, thank you for watching. Have a nice day and stay safe.